So we have to understand that we have to really understand that we enter a very, very slippery slope when we're dealing with the concept of the acquisition of knowledge. And that if because this is our circumstance, because man has already fell, we can't go back and rewind. The fruit has already been eaten rather.
But sometimes it happens again and again.
So we have to make sure that we deal with the acquisition of knowledge from a very careful perspective, to not continue to create problems. Because right now, the acquisition of knowledge is very problematic. It creates classism, it creates genderism, sexism, racism. During American slavery, pretty much any slavery, slaves are not allowed to read. They're not allowed to learn. Women are not allowed to get a certain amount of knowledge, and the knowledge that they're able to, or they block out certain subjects, the sciences, mathematics. They're carried into liberal arts and humanities. So this is important because we sit in classrooms every day and we may be feeding to the very evil notions of the status quo. Instead of doing what? Doing our real jobs, which is inspiring minds. What was you going to say, Maria?
No, I wanted to ask the way people like to compare Steve Jobs and not going to school, okay, with the current student. The current student has that knowledge, not from being taught, but through maybe hearing it or through maybe research, and they know that people like Steve Jobs did not go to school and they're millionaires, right?
Well, he went to school, he just dropped out of school.
They dropped out of school.
But you gotta also understand that Steve Jobs, people like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates also had an upper advantage. They had an upper hand advantage in that they came from relatively affluent and stable backgrounds.
Good.
So there's a lot of other variables that are involved.
So that is my question. Now, how are you to relate that to the student to make sure that this child stays in class and gets the importance of learning? Because if a student will take that, and most of these students, especially in Arabic background, they come from families that are influential, families that are well off.
Some of them, don't say most of them.
Yeah. How do you make that child to sit in class and say, like, okay, as much as Steve Jobs did not or did not continue with education, but this is what he did in school, or this is what was in school, or this is what he participated in school. How do you
do that? So we do that by inspiring the amygdala. We're going to talk about that. We talked about that in the first class. We have to personalize that instruction. We have to understand that they have in their limbic system in their brain, they have something called the amygdala that is continuously asking the question, what's in it for me? And if you can feed into that notion, the only reason why Bill Gates and Steve Jobs dropped out of school because they saw nothing in it for them. You understand? They understood that what they needed to be wasn't university. All right. So if we can personalize instruction, speak to individuals, and tell them what's in it for them, speak to their amygdalas, they'll stay. The problem is you have to get to know your students.
So does that mean they're teachers or not good teachers?
Huh?
No, it's...
That means we have to shift as a paradigm throughout the world. We have to shift our thinking.
You know, the two, Jobs and the other one, they had something that they wanted to do. He was focused on computers or something, but they didn't have anything. What did they invent? They had something. That's why they dropped off of school and they pursued that thing.
My question is, should we encourage students to do that?
If they have an invention, they have an invention, something that's going. Why is Steve Jobs all over the world?
We understand their vision and encourage them to develop that path.
Something that you can't just drop out of school.
You can
It's
just
going nowhere.
guide them.
I think that I think this is the truth. That learning is the basis. Forgot. Learning is knowledge. So before you get to go anywhere, you should have knowledge first. The foundation. I think it is.
I mean, listen, Miriam actually begs a very important question. Listen, my grandfather dropped out of school in the 3rd grade. He had a 3rd grade education. He was able to take care of 12 kids, own a house, and be a pretty influential person in his community with a 3rd grade education. And my grandfather was no different than many of the men of his generation. There was universities during his time. There was high school during his time. So Miriam actually begs a very good point. Are we placing too much emphasis on school? Driving people towards the status quo? I don't know. There was, in many, even to this day, in many cultures, you're 12 years old, you're 10 years old. All right, you know your ABCs and 1, 2, 3s and know how to count. It's time to take care of family, especially if dad is passed on or not in the picture. It's time to go to work. So you can sustain your family, so you can feed your siblings. Is that person not successful? Will that person not acquire knowledge? No, he will acquire knowledge in a different way.
You said like our students they lack experience, right? So when they have experience, they gain knowledge.
Yeah, but when that student goes off and starts working, he gets the same experience. In fact, it's accelerated because it's what? Authentic. All right? What we call on-the-job training. It's authentic. The students that I teach now that's going to go through these medical school, what happens when they graduate medical school? They're going to go work in a hospital. And what is the hospital, the chief or whatever department going to tell them? What's he going to tell them? Forget everything you learned in medical school. This is how we do it here in this hospital.
True.
So he has to be what? Retaught. In a very authentic way. Why do we have nurses in hospitals? Why are nurses important? Because nurses keep doctors in check. Nurses school doctors. Look, doc, this is not the most efficient way to do it. Do it this way.
I feel like sometimes
That's what nurses are there for.
Yeah.
Without nurses, you would not have anything. Because they
Check the doctors.
behind the scene, not in front of you, but behind the scene, nurses drive the hospital. The doctors are asking the nurses, what should I do next?
I think the nurses work harder than doctors.
They work harder.
Yes.
They check the doctor. Oh my God. I better go.
Oh, believe me. Okay. Why? Because what normally happens is the nurses have more practical experience in a given situation because the nurses are there with the patients. They're sitting there with the patient for 12 hours straight, where the doctor is running around.
And like my mom's doctor, she goes home at about like 3:34, and the nurses stay there like 12 hours straight.
So we have to understand that we don't teach classes, we teach individuals. And especially here in the Middle East and Saudi Arabia, this becomes very, very interesting in that most of our students are dressed the same. They all have white clothes on, or they all have black abayas on.
I will say.
And in my case, And in my case, they all have scrubs on, blue scrubs, white lab coats. They all look the same. They all sound the same. So it's very easy to say there's no difference. This is a class. So we also got to keep in mind that just because they're dressed the same and that they're the same age, they're totally different individuals. So we have to cater to. Then we have to differentiate our instruction to. I got to figure out where to put this stuff down. It's not in a good place because every time you guys talk, I don't get a chance to catch. They're not the same people. And the reality is the only way we can effectively teach these people, and this goes to Miriam's question, is by getting to know them. So we can speak to their amygdala. We can speak to that part of the brain that's asking and begging, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? Why do I have to learn this? Teacher, why is this important to me? Why do I have to learn about World War II? World War II is not going to do anything for me because I want to be a dentist. Tell me why I have to learn about World War II. Tell me why I have to learn about algebra or geometry when my dad is worth $2 billion. Tell me why do I have to learn English when I don't want to ever go to America or the UK? What's in it for me? And this is why it frustrates me so much that there's so much of a focus to teach based on teach using those textbooks. It frustrates me. Because yes, in these modern day textbooks, the people who create these textbooks, they know everything that I'm telling you today. And they make the attempt to get the teacher to personalize the instruction. But the reality is, what we do is page 1, page 2, page 3, and we miss the overall intent of what they're trying to do when they do the lessons. When they offer an example or a model or previewing, we miss those. We don't understand and read what the textbook is really trying to do. They're trying to get you to personalize the instruction in the textbook and move away from them. They're trying to get you to say, hey, look, this is only a guide. You may have to alter the model paragraph. You may have to alter the practice examples. You may have to alter the examples that you give to fit your students, to satisfy the what's in it for me. So that's the question then becomes, how do we find out more about our students? Especially when we have pacing. We have our bosses down our throats saying, do you get your weekly plans in? Are you on pace? This is that status quo stuff. This is that fall of man stuff. It's the fall of man stuff that negatively affects our teaching. When we need to slow down and get to know our students. When schools are not this rigid institution or rigid environment, but it's more free-flowing, where students get to what? Talk. And we listen. Because the same letters that are in listen are in some. And too often, we want to be the purveyors of knowledge. We want to stand in front of people. We want to stand in front of these young people and say, look, I'm going to transfer the knowledge I have in my mind. Just sit there, shut up, and be quiet. when some of our students need to run around like maniacs in order to learn. And so are we resourceful enough? Are we dedicated enough to provide that student with that space? To let out his creativity or her creativity? Or do we call them a problem child and call them, oh, he's ADHD? If you notice in the group, what frustrates me more than anything, and a lot of things frustrate me, is that when teachers do diagnose students, you're not a doctor. Stop diagnosing students. You don't know what a student has ADHD or anything. Start diagnosing students. In fact, I believe that most of those diagnoses, even by doctors, are incorrect. Because doctors get into what? The status quo thing. Just make up what you want to hear. You want to hear that students ADHD that make you feel good, better about your teaching? Okay, fine. Let's medicate him and put him in a constant state of psychosis. So he walks around like a zombie, and we now created a human being that's dependent on drugs. And then we wonder why he's a drug addict, or she becomes a drug addict. As long as you write me a nice little check in that regard, I'll write you whatever diagnosis you want to hear.
That's true. I mean, I'm diagnosed with epilepsy, okay? And my parents, my mom is a doctor, so they believe that I have to take a certain dosage. And then I changed the dosage, and I made it less. They didn't need it so much. And I made it less, and I'm fine, and I'm stable. You know? And then I just don't want to tell her, because she's still on the status quo. She's like, we need to follow this thing. And right now, I'm completely stable. I don't get any seizures anymore. But then if I tell her, she'll get mad. She'll go, we have to follow status quo. And
that's the problem with the status quo, getting mad. You're not following my, what? I'm a doctor. I'm the one that went through 18 years of school and da-da-da-da-da-da. But who knows best for themselves but the person? And if the person ends up killing themselves or doing harm to themselves, so be it. It's their personal space.
You know what's weird? When I had the big dosage, I used to get more seizures.
The problem is that schools are not really in the business of students acquiring knowledge. Schools are in the business of placing people in boxes to make society run efficiently. If I can place you in a box, okay, and I can have this expectation of you, listen, you're a female, okay, you're Pakistani, okay, this is your life, this is what society needs you to do. Okay, so just go in this box, okay, oh, so no, you're a problem. Oh, you're a problem. Because it's easy to do that. It's easy just to place people in boxes. And that's the reality is, and that's why I call it the fall of man. The reality is that's the plight of schools. So people like Jay-Z, people like Bill Gates, they realize that at the end of the day, it's all bullshit. And this is what rich people realize. It's all BS. And that puts us as teachers in a very interesting predicament. Because once you realize that it's all, you said it, I didn't. We have to ask ourselves, how does that change and alter our teaching? Do we tell the student who has that dream, you know what, this is not the place for you, go somewhere else?
No.
Because in the reality, it might just put us out of business. Or do we speak to their amygdala and make them yearn to be with us? Because we're feeding not the status quo, that curriculum. We're not feeding them that status quo, what the government or what society says they need to know. But we're feeding that individual person, that individual, what's in it for me. So now begs the question again, how do we get that information? How do we get to know our students when we have the status quo opposing us? What do we do? Well, the reality is we have to take time to get to know our students. We have to reduce our teacher stuff. We talked about that a lot already. We have to reduce it. Teachers talk. We have to shut up, which is one of my biggest problems. We have to shut up and let the students talk. So we can learn and we can record either physically or mentally, so we can create lesson plans that speak to their amygdalas. Personalizing the instruction. And there's a lot of research that's done on this. You have Garner's theory of multiple intelligence. You heard about that? Of multiple intelligence. Which basically says the students don't learn the same way. And therefore we can't treat them all the same. Students don't learn the same way, and therefore we cannot treat them all the same. You have different types of learners and have different perspectives you have. In grad school, I learned that there was abstract learners and concrete learners and concrete abstract and abstract concrete learners. You have left brain learners and right brain learners. There's a lot of different theories out there, and they're all basically they're yelling to us, Shiny. They're yelling that we have to stop this monolithic teaching. That we have to stop lecturing. Especially in K-12. We probably should stop doing it in university. But you gotta understand, the university will be different because the lecturer is supposed to challenge you to go out and teach yourself. This is why online learning in university works. And this is why blended learning will work in the future, even in K-12. So the research already tells us that we can't treat the students the same, that we have to get different styles. We also have to look at what they have in common, because they are a group of people, so we have to look at what they have in common. And it's like being a coach. When you're a teacher and a coach, you have to see who the players are in each class. And see what they have in common, and see what their general strength is. And mainly teach to that, and then branch off and throw nuggets or personal bits. So you're grabbing individual students as the lesson goes on. And we can only do that by listening. This is why I believe, eat with your students. See, that's another thing I don't like here. There's not a culture of lunch here in the Middle East and Saudi schools. It's not this culture of lunch. Having lunch together. More transpires as it relates to learning and life in the lunchroom than ever will happen in the classroom. That's where real learning takes place. Because we get to see how students interact with one another. And if we were a fly on the wall, we get to hear all the conversations. Their personal life, their personal business, what they really feel about the teacher, how difficult that homework assignment was, or the teacher, or the quiz was, or their anxiety about the test, or how they really could learn. Because when they're with each other over lunch, food makes you become real. And as a teacher in the public school system in America, in high school, I used to invite students or allow students to come have lunch with me in my classroom. And you learn so much about them. You learn about their family life, their desires, their dreams, and they become connected with you. you don't have to partake. In fact, you probably shouldn't partake. You should just listen. You shouldn't say anything because you don't want to get yourself in any, you don't want to get too personal with students. Just listen. They're not asking you to they're not really asking for you to respond. They're just asking you to listen. They just want you to listen. Because they're really not interested in your opinion anyway.
Not
But
necessarily.
their ear, they want your ear.
After we look at what they have in common, what should we do?
Hmm?
After we look at what they have in common, what should we do? Of course,
You cater, then you cater your lesson, that teacher's paradigm, everything from the greeting all the way down to the cumulative activity, and you throw bits and pieces in that in your lesson to personalize that. You use that information as your intelligence. The same way the CIA and the FBI and the Saudi intelligence agency uses intelligence to find terrorists and people who are doing acts against the government. It's the same thing you do in your teaching. You use this intelligence, these bits of information, and you pepper them into your lesson plan. So you speak to Nina, you speak to Rose, you speak to Reem. So they perk up, oh, she's speaking to my amygdala. And then we have to also understand this notion, and this is another thing that really gets me upset. You don't know your students. Oh, I know my students. I've been teaching 7th grade for 17 years. I know my students. You don't know your students. Okay? I hear teachers say this a lot, especially teachers who think they just superstar teachers. I know my students. I've been teaching at this school for and I've been teaching this grade, and I know this textbook, and I told their mother, and I know it. And I had one teacher student said, listen, at night the mothers call me to ask me what I should feed their children and put them to bed. I was like, what are you talking about? There's no mother calling you to put their child to bed. And if a mother's calling you to put their child to bed, she needs help. She needs help. And I'm not talking about parenting help. She needs psychological help. You don't know your students because of everything I talked about. But you know the real reason you don't know your students? Each class, each year, each academic year, I don't care how many years you've been teaching at that same school, that same subject. Do you know the one reason why you don't know your students? There's one reason you don't know your students.
You don't listen, isn't it?
Concerned about teaching.
So it's one reason. I don't care where you are in the world, you would never know your students.
Salary.
Salary. Oh. What is that? It's age. You're older than them. Listen, I share something with you. I first started teaching. Anybody who came to the first lesson, the first pre-lesson, I told you my story of how I started teaching.
Yes.
So when I got in the classroom, I was about 25 years old. I was still young. I was about 50 pounds lighter. I was in shape. I was very sexy. I was once a very sexy man. There was a time when I was a very sexy man. I don't know what happened. There was a time when I was really sexy. And I was very cocky too. You can tell me I just left the military. You know, I traveled the world. And so I came in the classroom and I taught in Baltimore City. I was a student at Baltimore City Public Schools. So I'm thinking, I know these kids. We're from the same city. I'm still young. I like hip hop. I listen to rap. I listen to the same music they listen to. I got in that classroom and they looked at me like I was 100 years old. And because I was traveling and I kind of lost some of my Baltimore accent, and I also lost a lot of my Baltimore mentality. They didn't relate to me. Yes, I was young, I was black, I was the same race as them. I went to the same school system as them. I've had the same struggles as they did. I could empathize with them because I was in their shoes. The reality is, it wasn't reciprocal. They didn't empathize with me. They thought I was from another city. I asked them, where do you think I think I'm from? He said, well, you from the suburbs. You're not from Baltimore. I said, I'm born and raised there. Oh, no, you must have been rich. No, we were poor. They had nothing in common with me. And it's a good thing. I had to realize that I had something in common with them. I had to also understand that they didn't identify with me. I was their teacher. And I was 10 years older than them. Because I was about 25. My 9th grade class was 14. So I'm 10. My 11th graders were 9 years old. I was 9 years older than them. They're in a totally different decade. Totally different music. The rap that I was listening to wasn't the rap that they were listening to.
Yeah.
You know? I could get into, I went to Washington, D.C. to go to the nightclubs. They would attend the house parties. I was raised in the 80s. The late 70s, early 80s. I graduated high school when most of them weren't even born yet. Or were extremely young. You don't know your students because you're not that same age. You're not in their generation. So that's by default, you don't know them. And the reality is they look at you as ancient.
No, not necessarily.
No, they look at you as ancient. No matter how, because I'm gonna tell you, one of the concerns that my principal had, Mr. Blumenfeld, he said, Ray, you're gonna have to, he said, Ray, don't smile. Later, research told me that this is what we call old school teaching. He's an old school teacher. He was the vice president. And the rule in old school teaching was, you don't smile until Christmas. Right? Why? And I used to go by this rule. In fact, here's the funny thing about it. I used to actually give talks. And my talk was, don't smile until Christmas. And then later on, when I got my other degrees and I did further research, I realized that I was completely wrong. That you smile. The research says we smile.
When I was told by one of the senior teachers,